If only this movie was in Swedish. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below and it's going to give you a pretty good overview of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus. In short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But this is our Is It Syllabus-Worthy series. This is where I take a recommendation from you guys, a horror movie that I've never seen before that you bring up in the comments to my videos, watch it for the first time, and then I let you know, is it syllabus-worthy? Is there something about it that makes it worthy of being included on the horror movie syllabus? And today, the movie that we're looking at is Wither. And Wither was recommended to us by Tigra Z, aka La Gente Correcta. I think that their screen name changed from when they first left the comment to now, but they gave us this recommendation in our Scandinavian horror video, recommending it as a potential Scandinavian movie, and it is. And it is interesting because they gave us a pretty high-level summary of the plot setup. They basically said, cabin in the woods, friends go there, there's a monster in the basement, and there are some sexy girls that get killed throughout the movie. That was all I had to go on, and it's interesting because that didn't trigger anything else in me, any thoughts or anything other than, cool, sounds like an interesting time, I'll check it out. And that's what I did. And I didn't look into anything before checking out the movie, so I didn't know exactly what that description was about. So I just went in blind, basically. And did I love it? Did I hate it? Let's find out. Like I said, the movie that we're looking at today is Wither. Wither came out in 2012 and was directed by a filmmaking duo named Sunny Laguna and Tommy Wiklund. And I'm guessing that they're Swedish filmmakers because it's a Swedish film. I'm not terribly familiar with them. They do have a handful of horror movie credits to their name in IMDb, the most notable of which, and the only one I happen to have seen, is Puppet Master of the Littlest Reich. So they're not novice filmmakers. They are definitely filmmakers with reps under their belt coming into this. And like I said, I'm assuming they're Swedish because it's a Swedish film, but they've done something here that is an interesting, ambitious, and potentially foolhardy or genius idea. And we're going to dig into that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie follows a familiar formula of a group of friends going to an abandoned cabin in the woods to hang out, have a good time. And when they get there, one of them discovers in the basement something unusual and potentially supernatural. And before you can say boo, there are a number of possessions happening, people acting in strange ways, deaths start happening, and of course, hijinks abound, as they tend to do in movies like these. We're not going to spoil the movie any more than that, so I'll stop there. But, well, we might spoil it a little bit, hopefully not too much. But the big spoiler, if you will, is that this is essentially a Swedish version of The Evil Dead. This is a movie that is basically cribbing, homaging, ripping off, whatever you want to call it, The Evil Dead. And it's interesting because on Tigrazi's explanation or description of the movie, that never occurred to me. It's high level enough that it never really clicked for me that this is going to basically be Evil Dead. But it is, and it's kind of unabashedly so. But it's interesting because there are a lot of similarities between it and Evil Dead. Like, obviously, cabin in the woods setup, something in the basement, people getting possessed. Even the main guy has like a blue shirt that's kind of like ash. So it's definitely kind of wearing its influences on its sleeve. But there are some really noteworthy and notable differences between this movie and Evil Dead. The first one right off the bat is that there is a neighbor character who has a little bit of knowledge of what's going on in the movie. He's a little more dialed in. He's a resource and an asset to the people in the movie. There's no Necronomicon in this, and there's not really the demonology aspect of it either. More on that in just a second. But perhaps most noteworthy is it doesn't really have the humor of the Evil Dead franchise, like especially Evil Dead 2 and going forward. Evil Dead tried to play it a little more straight, but it was kind of campy because of the low budget and whatnot. In this case, it's low budget, but it's still playing it very, very straight. It's not trying to be campy or tongue-in-cheek at all, and it's really not leaning into the goofiness that like Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness and stuff lean into. It really is playing it straight. And it's interesting because this is was marketed as the first Swedish zombie movie. And that's not really true. When I did a little research after watching the movie, there are actually at least one other zombie movie from Sweden that predates it. I forget the name. I forgot to write it down, unfortunately. But it's false marketing. They were kind of trying to build this up as a zombie film. But it's interesting because there is an argument to be made that it's not really a zombie film. It's really, and neither is Evil Dead. Really, Evil Dead is kind of a demonic possession movie, demons. This one is not zombies. This one is actually something called the Vitra. And that's the biggest noteworthy difference. There's not demonology like there is in Evil Dead in this one. It's leveraging Swedish folklore, Norse mythology, and it's leveraging specifically this Norse creature called the Vitra, which is essentially a wight that is kind of doing a lot of the same things that the Evil Dead demons did in terms of like possession and stuff like that. And like the idea that the wight will impersonate somebody and kind of take over their life. It's really interesting because they found this, at least new to me, folklore, like mythical creature, and they're leveraging that in an Evil Dead format or Evil Dead story. It worked for me pretty well. They do a pretty neat job of explaining the creature or the folklore of the creature in the opening credits. There are these drawings that are shown during the opening credits that basically kind of give you a little bit of what the creature is, what it does, how it works, and gives you a little bit of a taste of that mythology. But of course, it's so early in the movie, you don't really necessarily know that's what's happening. It's only like on a rewatch that you really kind of click for that. And I mentioned that they marketed this as a zombie film, and that's because the way the possession aspect works in this movie really follows the zombie rules. Now, in my limited Wikipedia style research of the Vitra, I didn't really find this aspect of it being part of it. It feels like they took the concept of the Vitra, but they kind of were very liberal with how it works. And they really used zombie rules here. Like basically, if somebody gets bitten or scratched or whatever by an infected person, they then become infected with the possession or whatever. So that's where I think the zombie aspect is coming in. Is you've got clearly dead people, really gory, and we'll get to that in a minute, that are acting like undead zombies, not necessarily slow, lumbering Romero zombies, a little bit more of the fast-paced modern zombie, but it really is a zombie kind of motif, but really filtered through this Swedish folklore lens that works really well. The change in the lore is welcome for me. The Vitra, which I guess Vitra translated into English directly means wither, and so that's the name of the movie. But I liked that they took this aspect of it and kind of infused a bit of a Swedish identity into what is essentially an Evil Dead knockoff, right? So I'm down for that. I think that's fun because I like Evil Dead, and I'm not so in love with Evil Dead. I don't have the same bona fide affection for it that so many others do, that I'm mad about the idea of them kind of doing a twist on it. I'm pretty much open to this just fine, in part because it's pretty strong filmmaking. It's pretty solid to strong filmmaking in this movie. The movie isn't without its flaws, but overall it's made fairly well. It's shot well, the acting is good, the effects are good, the lighting is good, sound is good, everything is perfectly fine. And it's not, again, it's not perfect, but it's definitely fine. I know it's a low budget movie, it's a single location, everything like that, but it didn't feel its budget. It didn't feel like a do-it-yourself type movie. And again, these are accomplished directors who have made real movies, so it's not like that kind of movie. It's a solid, real movie, even though it is essentially, again, ripping off Evil Dead, almost like a fan film in a way, but not really. But I liked that it started out really strong. It has this opening scene, this opening kill that's pretty shocking and grabs you pretty well. And then it spends some time building things up, and it's building it up well, I felt. It's only 20 to 25 minutes till somebody gets possessed, and only 30 minutes till the first attack is happening. And that may seem like a long time, but it's really not. The pacing is strong, in small part because they're doing a decent amount of character development that I felt worked pretty well. They're setting up these characters that are, honestly, a whole group of impossibly pretty people. There's just beautiful people, men and women. You're in Sweden, right? Like, they're just gorgeous people, but they're giving them some character traits, not too deep. Let me be clear. It's, it's kind of the standard like slasher trope in a sense to like set these characters up so you know something about each one to kind of like separate them or identify them or make them unique, and then you watch them kind of fall and get picked off, right? But they did a good job with this, and they made it captivating enough and interesting enough, and you knew what was coming because of the opening scene, that you were kind of anticipating this, and it was building up to something pretty good. And like I said, I felt like it got to it pretty quickly. I never felt bored. I felt like it got to it pretty quickly. And then when things pop off, they pop off fast and they pop off good. One of the strengths of this movie is the gore. The gore and the makeup effects are really good in this movie. They did a really nice job of making the makeup feel visceral and gross. Again, this is where you're kind of getting the zombie thing, but they didn't just like paint their faces or whatever. They really had some gore effects in here, some decent gags. It's low budget, right? So they're shooting around some stuff, but it was very effective. And they're using tons of blood. It's funny because, the obvious comparison for this movie would be the Evil Dead remake, which also used a lot of blood. And I was thinking about that watching this movie once I'd kind of dialed into what was going on, that it's a remake essentially, or a reboot or ripoff. And the fact that they were using the Evil Dead blood soaked thing that they used in the remake really kind of worked for me on this one. It's a highlight of the movie, the gore aspect of this, the violence on this. It is, however, also where there's some controversy around this movie. Again, did the research after watching the movie on this. And one of the things that was noteworthy about this was that there was some controversy about the depictions of violence to women in this movie. Guys like punching women and this and that. And it's because they're possessed, right? So I don't know how warranted the critique is. You don't really have like men abusing women until they become, the vitra, the monster, right? But it is kind of unsettling to see just like flat out guys punching girls in the face and stuff like that. So I can understand where the criticism came from. Even before I read about it, I did have a little bit of a reaction to it watching the movie. So that was kind of an interesting thing to see that I wasn't the only one who zeroed in on that. And like I said, I don't know that it warrants too much uproar given the plot of the movie, but it is something that I noticed watching it. And the movie is just kind of gleefully gory and violent when it gets going. And like I said, it's Evil Dead, and it's not really terribly shy about it being Evil Dead, but it doesn't have the same panache or do-it-yourself like charm and campiness of the Evil Dead. So it's an interesting one. It really is better to compare it to the Evil Dead remake, which a lot of the reviews I read about it after the fact did do. They compared more to the remake, and on that case, it's kind of like an on par comparison. Like I think the Evil Dead remake had a bigger budget, and you can tell, and had some better production values. But overall, story wise, tone wise, the gore may be a little bit better than the Evil Dead remake. But again, that's a kind of a budget issue. Overall, I think they're doing a pretty good job of reaching that kind of level. So, like, if you like Evil Dead remake, you probably would like this movie. But does that mean that I liked this movie? And more importantly, does that mean it's syllabus worthy? Let's find out. So, is Wither syllabus worthy? Nope. Nope. Look, I think this is a pretty good movie. I think this is a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with this movie. But the problem is that it's just not an original movie. It's just really not. And this is a common critique when you read the reviews of the movie, is that it's not original. It's an Evil Dead ripoff. It really is. And even though you can maybe argue and be kinder to it and say it's an homage, it really is still just Evil Dead thrown through a Swedish prism with some tweaks to it. Now, those tweaks are interesting. Like the Vitra concept is really interesting. Having the neighbor who knows what's going on and who's dialed in was a really interesting like aspect to it that added to the movie quite a bit. So there was a lot of things about this to like that I thought was trying to make something new out of out of a non-original movie, not original idea. Basically take an Evil Dead movie and then make a twist on it. It's a cool idea. It hampers its syllabus worthiness, if I'm being honest, right? Look, there's not a lot of pedigree to this movie outside of Sweden, and it seems like the biggest pedigree of this movie in Sweden is probably the controversy about the violence against women and the supposed first zombie movie from Sweden, which wasn't even true, right? So these are things that kind of hamper its ability to be noteworthy enough to be on the syllabus as well. In fact, it may be worth noting that like the movie is called Cabin of the Dead in some markets, including like the copy I saw was called Cabin of the Dead, which threw me off a little bit. I thought for a second that I was maybe watching the wrong movie. Turned out I wasn't, and I figured that out. But it's noteworthy that the movie's title isn't even like solidified as the title to some degree. And I mentioned earlier that while it's a good movie and it's pretty solid filmmaking, it's not without its flaws. And the flaws do kind of bring it down a little bit. Like the jump scares in the movie are hit and miss, and I think maybe more miss than hit, frankly. And some of the characters have reactions in the movie that I found to be very strange. It's just odd ways of reacting that didn't feel realistic and felt like they were just serving the plot. And while the gore and the violence in the movie is very good, it's really the highlight of the movie, they get a little repetitive with these mindless attacks, these creatures attacking and just kind of doing kind of the same thing over and over again. Now, there's some twists as the movie goes on in terms of how people are dispatched and stuff like that, but it really does start to get a little repetitive in the second half, and the end loses steam as a result at the end there. None of this really hampered my enjoyment of the movie. It was still well paced enough, well made enough that I was having a really good time with it. But if we're talking about making it into the syllabus and making it syllabus worthy, these things have to be mentioned. They have to be taken in consideration. So a lack of pedigree, a couple of flaws that make the movie, that stood out enough for the movie to be noteworthy, and the lack of really any kind of true buzz other than this controversy I mentioned earlier doesn't make it stand up to the syllabus. It makes it fall short. It's unfortunate because, again, I think this is a good movie. It's worth your time for sure. And if you like Evil Dead, I do think this is probably worth your time. I think you'd enjoy it. But is it syllabus worthy? No, it's not going to make the cut, unfortunately. So that's my thoughts on Wither. I did have a good time with it. I do think people should check it out. I don't think it's, that hard to find or anything like that. Again, might be called Cabin of the Dead. Don't get too confused with that. But if you like Evil Dead, if you like the Evil Dead remake in particular, I think that you'll probably enjoy this one. Manage your expectations, of course, but and learning a little bit about the Vitra is kind of cool, and it might inspire you to go and do a little research and checking it out. I know I'm more interested in the Vitra after watching this movie, so I'm going to check into that a little bit more. But first, I'm going to check out a horror trivia pursuit card. It's that time of the video where I like to read a horror trivia pursuit card on camera and try to answer the question and hopefully not get it wrong. And since we're talking about the Vitra, we're talking about a monster, we're going to do the monster category and the card. And here is our question. What is the name the group of child protagonists give themselves in 2017's It? I do know the answer to this question. We've gotten a few It questions on these cards. I feel like these cards have certain movies that they really like to kind of go back to over and over again. And one of them is It, which I'm not complaining about. Like the 2017 It was great. And that is It Chapter 1, right? Chapter 2, less great. And as we've talked about previously, that's more of a byproduct of the book and having the two different time periods. And frankly, the children time period is just more interesting than the adult time period. It just is. And there's no way around that. It was true in the 1990s TV miniseries, and it's true in the modern day theatrical remake of it. But I do like the movie quite a bit, and I've read the book multiple times. And a very good book. It's one of my favorite Stephen King books, honestly. And so I definitely know the answer to this question, and I'm guessing because this movie was so popular, a lot of you probably do as well. It's one of those things that didn't get harped on too much in the movie, so maybe you don't remember it super well, so maybe it's kind of escaping you, and I'm kind of prattled on a little bit to give you some time to think about it, but hopefully you remember. If you've seen the movie, again, I do think that it's something that is noteworthy enough to stick in your mind, but if not, take a guess. Lock it in right now because we're about to go ahead and answer the question. So locked in? Okay. So my answer is The Losers. They call themselves The Losers in the book and in the movie, I think in also the miniseries, but let's see what the card says. Card says The Losers Club, which, yes, the Losers Club. I'm going to give myself credit for that. It's the Losers and the Losers Club. Fair enough. But I think that if you saw the 2017 It, you might remember this pretty well because like one of the kids has lover, like somebody writes loser on his cast and he changes it to lover, but they kind of adopt the name the Losers Club because they're outcasts and everything like that. So I'm guessing a lot of you got this right. But if you didn't, let me know what you guessed in the comments below. I do like the wrong answers that are funny, so give that to me. Thank you very much for hanging out to the end of the video. Thank you much for Tigger Z for this really great recommendation. I had a lot of fun with it, even though it's not syllabus worthy. Definitely had a good time with it. And keep those recommendations coming. I'm making a list. I'm checking it twice. I'm not really checking it twice. I am checking it quite a bit, though, when I try to figure out what I'm going to watch next. And if you come up with something that I haven't seen before and I put it on the list, I'll probably wind up doing a video about it at some point in time. But until then, I'm just going to say, class dismissed.